Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go! I was visiting my grandfather in the hospital a few days ago, and the hospital he was in is one of the biggest in our state. It is basically a maze of hallways, and there are so many floors that the elevators take forever to pick you up. As I was leaving, I had to wait 5 minutes for the first elevator to arrive. Unfortunately, when it opened, there were two very large men standing there with their arms folded, just staring at me unmoving. I've seen this episode of BuzzFeed Unsolved before, so I decided to wait for the next one. Nearly 10 minutes go by before the next elevator arrives, and when it does, there are 3 women standing in it. One of them leaves and I exclaim, "Oh, finally!" before trying to rush to get in before the doors start closing. The 2 remaining women watch as I rush forward, reaching to stop the doors. Usually, one would push the button to keep the doors open, basic human decency. But they couldn't be bothered. They watched as they saw me begin panicking, trying to wrench my hand out before the elevator starts moving. All the while, the button to open the doors is right there. Eventually, I was able to free my hand, leaving a 4-inch space in the door. I then got to listen as the door struggled to close again, and the elevator seemed to give up. Then I got to hear them A. realize they were stuck, B. try to fail and make the doors close, and C. have to press a cool button to get help. They were still stuck as the next elevator pulled up and I boarded, and they were still stuck as I left. All of this could have been avoided with the press of a button. Good morning all. As much as I'd like to start this off by saying things like, "Let me tell you a little bit about me," or "I'm so pity I performed at the Super Bowl halftime show in 2008, and then go into a diatribe about just how pity I could be, this is far from the truth. Perhaps in some alternate pity verse, where over a dozen college students were playing the part of and absolutely nailing whiny middle school students complaining about course requirements, or if they happen to begin to repeatedly harass me by way of being on in-grade demo mode, or spinning the wheel of "you suck at teaching" to come up with a yet another complaint insult wrapped in a thinly veiled question about me and how I run my course. Perhaps and not let nature take its course and let my pittiness bloom, like a flower transplanted from an artificial habitat to a campus-bordering field in a form of malicious compliance. Wouldn't you know it? Somehow, someway, pity finds a way. That being said, I really try to be a positive, supporting, caring, empathetic, far from sardonic college instructor. My clientele, as referred above, are mostly college-age students who are enrolling in what is basically a pre-algebra course my community college likes to call college mass. I have the occasional young whiz kid who enrolls in my course to be super advanced, but for the most part young adults in their 20s and 30s are who I teach, and solving systems of equations by substitution is currently what I teach them. I have many students who struggle and require additional tutoring, and I'm always happy to oblige. There is this one student who I wish would show up to our makeshift tutoring group but never does. Let's call her Mara. Mara acts like she's the chosen one. She seriously acts like we're back in high school, interrupting my demonstrations miraculously because I literally direct the instruction for 3 to 5 minutes before I popcorn around the room and treat it like a very large standard tutoring session. "Mr. OB, my dad says this isn't the way to solve it. Mr. OB, why don't you teach at ASU? Our partnering major university we transfer students to. What did you do wrong that you're teaching at this place?" And the list goes on and on. For brevity's sake, I'll make sure this story doesn't. We have an exam that about half the class got a 90 or better on, followed by most of the rest getting B's, C's, and so on. I know that this community college, despite its cheap cost, still has many students on full scholarship for one thing or another, whether it be sports, personal hardships, activities, and so on. That being said, if I notice a student tanking the test, I may just grade the thing on a curve to allow them to get the most points possible. This is what I chose to do for Mara. And she wound up with an 18 out of 25 on her exam, and I typed in a score, took a glance at her paper afterward, and realized she actually missed yet another question. A major one. That would have brought her grade super low. I decided to look the other way. Part laziness, part being nice. Let's not say how much each part's worse, but they ain't equal. So it's time to return the test that I already had graded in the system when Mara starts up with her questions again. They are literally too tiresome to include. I will say her final piece, however. Mr. Obi, I noticed that you gave me an 18 out of 25 on my last test. Could I take a look at the test and see what I got wrong? I definitely didn't miss that much. I tried to use inflection to let her know that she should probably just be happy with the 18 by saying, "Yeah, I think I'll be happy with the 18 there, kiddo." Then she suddenly dropped a pity pipple at the top of a snowy hill. She continues, this time standing, walking towards me and pointing her Cruella de Vil finger at me, saying, "No, you can't just put whatever you want for my grade. 18 out of 25 is not even possible. I need to keep my GPA high because of all my scholarships. You need to grade my test accurately." Enter pitilicious compliance. I knew good and well that she did not deserve by any stretch of the imagination anywhere near the 72% that 18 out of 25 is. She didn't master 72% of the content. She did not get 72% of the questions correct. I'll be honest and say that when I grade dozens of exams, I tend to look at the most important questions on each test and ensure these are 100% accurate. I always pepper in some spiraling thinky type questions, stuff with rigor, but I don't grade against it. If I ever make an error in grading, it 150% of the time favors the student. I took her particular course's paper out of my plot dash case, filed through the exams and found her particular one, and I looked at it, quizzically. Then I looked back at her while my head was still positioned towards the paper. I'm trying so hard to give her an out, but she wouldn't budge. So I say, you know what, you're right. I did make an error. Oh crud. More than one. I then went behind my desk where the students couldn't see what I was looking at. I graded her paper right then and there. By this time, I had memorized the answers to the exam without even needing to pull out the key. But I did, so I made sure she knew I was grading it thoroughly. Accurately. She wound up with a 14 out of 25. I handed it back to her right then and there, and let her know that I had changed the grade accordingly in her grade book. That 14 she got one of the solutions to the system she just managed to solve for Y, but not for X, turned her high C to a solid D. She looked through the exam, scouring it, looking like the toy man from Toy Story, using an infinitely increasing series of overlapping lenses to look for one minuscule error on my part. I also made sure I took a picture of the test before handing it back, so she couldn't pull the "see, I made it negative, it's right" sort of thing. She's done that in the past. She quickly whipped out her phone to see how much this grade impacted her overall. She was livid without a direction to hurtle it toward. I could see that this act of pity, MC, on my part, was a little too far. I actually feel bad for Mara. As she looked up at me, I could see her eyes well up a little bit. It was that too quiet right before something bad was about to happen. My spidey senses were tingling. Side note, this is why I hate Avengers Endgame. Anyways, before she started to take her clenched arms, that she looked like she was trying to remove the top of the desk from its connected chair and turn them on me. I offered the solution. Look, Mara, remember you can do corrections on the exam for a force of the credit back, right? That will get you almost all the points that you were gifted in the first place. What do you say? She sheepishly agreed. Wound up with 17.5 out of 25, and has yet to give me a hard time since. But I'm pretty sure my semester survey will suffer greatly. Okay, so we're starting this story with naming the entitled lady who lived on our street Karen. She thought she was better than everyone else and didn't like anyone having fun near her house, especially the kids. She would always complain to our parents about the noise we made while playing outside and was never satisfied with anything. One summer day, a group of us were playing with water guns on the street when Karen came out of her house with a huge water gun and started shooting us. We were all soaking wet and so surprised that she would do something like this. "Hey, what are you doing?" cried Timmy, one of my friends. "You kids are making too much noise," Karen replied with a scowl on her face. "I need some peace and quiet." "We're just having fun," I replied, trying to reason with her. "We will try to be quieter, okay?" "No, it's not okay," Karen said sharply. "I don't want you playing near my house." And with that, she continued to soak us with her water gun until we were all drenched. We had to run away to avoid getting hit. "What was that about?" Timmy asked as we took refuge in my yard. "I have no idea," I replied, still in shock. She's never acted like this before. We were all upset and went to our parents to tell them what happened. They were just as shocked as we were and decided to do something about it. A group of them went over to Karen's house to talk to her, but she was very rude and refused to apologize. "I don't have to apologize for anything," Karen told them. "I just want those brats to stay away from my house." My parents and the other parents were very upset and decided to have a meeting with all the neighbors to discuss what to do about Karen. In the end, they came up with a plan to teach her a lesson. A few days later, the whole neighborhood came together to have a big water fight right in front of Karen's house. We all had our water guns ready and were having so much fun. Karen tried to stop us, but we were too many for her. She tried to run inside, but we surrounded her house and wouldn't let her escape. "Stop this at once," Karen yelled, but no one listened. In the end, she got so wet that she had to go back inside and give up. We all had a good laugh and felt like we got our revenge. After the big water fight, and after we somehow got our revenge, the neighbors still felt uneasy around her. One day a rumor started to spread that Karen was going to sell her house and move to a different neighborhood. The rumor turned out to be true though, and Karen ended up leaving the neighborhood shortly after the water fight incident. Many of the neighbors were relieved to see her go, while others were a bit sad to see her go because they had seen the change in her and wanted to give her a second chance. But in the end, everyone agreed that it was for the best that Karen had moved on to a new neighborhood where she could start fresh and hopefully not repeat her past behavior. I just ran into my old high school teacher and was reminded of this, so thought I'd post it here. Back when I was in high school, I got really sick at the beginning of my senior year and had to take a long leave of absence. By the time I got better, not only did I basically have to do that year all over again, but it meant all of my friends had graduated. I was miserable and feeling all alone, and worst of all, I was a stereotypical smart kid who also now happened to be older than they are, so got picked on a lot as well. We were taking a test when there was an emergency and the teacher had to step outside for a few minutes. The other students were trying to get me to give them the answers to the questions when Leah, one of the more popular students, stepped in and told them to knock it off. She seemed kind and helpful, and we became fast friends. Back then, college applications required sealed letters of recommendations to be mailed in by the student, and the programs I was applying to required 2 LORs. I decided to get 3 just in case. One of them was from my literature teacher, because although I was applying to science programs and already had been promised LORs from 2 of my science teachers, I wanted to show that I had broad interests. Mr. M was surprised to be asked but agreed, and he asked me to give him a 2-page essay about myself so he could flesh out the LOR. I appreciated that he was taking it so seriously and worked hard on that essay. However, it took so long that he only gave me the LOR literally the day before the applications were to be sent out. On top of that, he left the envelope unsealed and told me to take a look before mailing it. I actually ended up being really thankful to him, since it wasn't all that positive, so I ended up discarding it. I didn't really think much of it since it wasn't like every teacher had to like me. However, as soon as our applications were mailed, Leah's attitude changed 180 degrees. At lunch, she told me no one liked me and that she had only tolerated me so I could help her get into college. Bullying then resumed in earnest, and she also spread several private things about myself to the other students so I could be further humiliated. It took me a while, but I realized that she shouldn't have known about a few of those things since I never told her, until I realized it was information that was in the essay I'd written for Mr. M, which was when I also found out from one of my friends in college that Leah was Mr. M's niece. And it became clear to me that the LOR was intended to be sabotaged, because had I not gotten 3, I would have been screwed. My applications would have been deemed incomplete and I would have had to apply the next year. I was furious, but there was nothing I could do. I no longer had any classes with Mr. M and had no proof the LOR was sabotage or that he'd given Leah access to my essay, and it was possible that Leah was the sole party responsible and Mr. M had no part in anything. So I just resigned myself to a hellish senior year. I spent as much time as possible in a school library since that was the only place I got a reprieve from my tormentors. I was fortunate enough to receive an early acceptance to the programs I'd applied to. Leah, however, was not so lucky. Despite not being that good of a student and not having met all the prerequisites, she'd still applied to the best schools in the area and ended up not getting any early acceptance letters. And by the time she did receive one, it was a conditional offer, contingent on her final GPA, which then gave me the perfect means of revenge. Leah was the type to overshare information and she wasn't exactly quiet when complaining about her grades, so it was easy enough to keep track. By the time our final months of high school approached, I knew she was relying on Mrs. T's class to pull her through. Mrs. T was really nice and she wanted everyone to succeed. And she also knew that for a lot of seniors, her class was either really important or completely unnecessary. So she always gave a final group project and a final exam that were worth a significant chunk of the grade. But the students had the option of doing only one or both. If you only did one, that grade applied to both. But if you did both, whichever one was higher was your grade for both. Because a group project was graded before the final exam, and there was time to study should you need a better grade, and she also curved the exam score as well just to give everyone the best chance. Being that I was the best student in the class and Mrs. T liked me, I asked her if I could be assigned to the same group as Leah and her friends, which she readily agreed to. Leah and her friends crowed about their luck. Assuming that they could skip it all in, I will be forced to do all the work, except they forgot that there was essentially no penalty for skipping this project. They were horrified when I told them, the day before the project was due, that I didn't do it. And Leah, in particular, was now in trouble since in order to attain the necessary GPA, she had to do well on the final exam. For about a week she apologized, tried to bribe me, and even begged me to go easy so the grading curve would be in her favor. I did no such thing, of course. I studied as hard as I'd ever done, and I aced it. My 100% meant there was no curve, and while Leah passed the class, it wasn't enough to boost her GPA. Word soon got around that she didn't get into college, and she had to take summer classes and an extra year to reapply. I made sure to give Mr. M a big smile when I saw him at graduation. This was in 6th grade. My physics teacher used to throw whiteboard chalks and dusters at me randomly only because she hated my community and our religious beliefs. She hated my native language and would constantly call me racial slurs because, according to her, my English was too good for a person born and brought up in India. I collected them all, the chalks. I then took the bag of chalks to the principal's office and just dropped all of them on her desk because she had demanded proof, and I delivered. That eventually got the teacher an 8 months suspension. The school was forced to hire 2 new teachers at this time because that one teacher used to teach multiple subjects and they needed a substitute for all of them. From here on, it was absolute chaos for the school. They had hired some German professor who was looking to be a foreign teacher in India. This gentleman was so pissed at the school's administration that he filed 2 lawsuits against the school before going back to Germany. The school lost both. The lawsuits alarmed the parents, and a lot of kids were pulled out from multiple classes right after this. The students who left started the Facebook page where they started sharing their abuse stories from the teachers and even the principal. The school suffered a major financial setback and eventually had to sell off one of their buildings to keep it functional. All the chaos brought other teachers under scrutiny too. A male teacher had molested me in 6th grade. This bloke went to jail for money laundering for a few months. Then they hired another teacher who was really nice though. She and I left that school in the same year. I went to another school in the city. She as a teacher and me as a student. She eventually went on to teach me in high school too, and it was one of the best years of my life so far.
And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching and see you next time.